It is also a truth universally acknowledged that wherever young men of fortune may go, the mothers of that area will be keen to have him marry one of their daughters. Mr. Bingley, whose income was said to be £5,000 a year, had barely arrived in the neighbourhood before the matchmaking mammas of Meryton began to calculate which of their eligible daughters he was most likely to marry. "It is certain he arrived yesterday, not today as we had thought he would," Mrs. Bennet said to her husband. "I have it from my sister Phillips, who heard it from Mrs. Nichols, the housekeeper at Netherfield."
"And what is that to us when this Mr. Bingley arrives?" Mr. Bennet laughed derisively from the comfort of his chair by the fire, where he was enjoying his newspaper. "What does it signify whether he came yesterday or today?"
"Why, Mr. Bennet, how can you be so obtuse?" Mrs. Bennet cried. "Why, you must visit him first before any of the others do, so that your girls may have the more immediate advantage over the others. Oh, the Lucases are sure to visit him early, since Sir William is the mayor. Lady Lucas would love nothing more than to see her Charlotte land a match like that, though with Charlotte being so plain, and already having been out these several years, perhaps Maria might have better luck, since she is a good deal prettier than her sister. All the more reason for you to get there first, Mr. Bennet."
"I fail to see how this is a race in any way."
"Oh, Mr. Bennet, how can you be so cruel? You must think of your poor girls, who, with such small dowries, would be at the mercy of your cousins should they fail to make a good match."
"My dear, I do not see whether my visiting Mr. Bingley a day earlier or later should make any difference as to our girl's chances with him. He shall have to meet them all before he can decide whether he takes a fancy to any of them. I do not depend upon his impression of me as bearing much weight in the matter. In fact, as I am but an old codger, I should think it would be more favourable for you and the girls to go in my stead."
"Mr. Bennet, you are being ridiculous."
"Quite so. Better that you should send the girls by themselves, for you are still quite as pretty as any of them. Mr. Bingley may like you best of them all."
"Oh, enough with your teasing. You have no compassion for my poor nerves."
You mistake me, my dear. I have the highest respect for them. They've been my constant companions these 20-some-odd years." Darcy looked at the eager faces around him and began to panic. Some were prettier than others, but none worthy of any notice. He glanced around for help. Bingley had apparently asked Jane Bennet to dance a second set. He was already lining up with her on the dance floor, looking like an adoring puppy dog. There would be no help from his quarter.
"Why, Mr. Darcy, have you not chosen a dance partner for this set yet?" Caroline Bingley had caught up with him. "I am still available, as you can see."
Now Darcy was trapped between her and the gaggle of giggling geese surrounding him. He realized it had been a mistake to dance with Caroline. Now that he had been seen dancing, he would be expected to dance the rest of the evening. There would be no escaping it. Failure to do so would put him in social jeopardy and ostracize him in the eyes of the neighborhood. But he could not bring himself to ask Caroline a second time, nor to give any other greedy mothers their satisfaction. What could he do? Through the crowds, Darcy spied Caroline and Charles Bingley's elder sister, Mrs. Hurst. Early on, she had secured a seat near the punch bowl, where she intended to remain the whole night, unless asked to dance by one of the men in her party. Her husband had already disappeared to the card-room, and would likely not reappear until it was time to leave, or until his pockets ran empty. There was a small gap between the giggling group of women, and he took it. "Louisa," Darcy said, startling Mrs. Hurst and causing her to drip punch down her dress. "Dance with me," he insisted, grabbing her arm before she could say no.
"Well, I suppose."
They found their places just as the music began again. Louisa staggered through the steps. Twice Darcy had to take her arm to ensure she did not crash into another dancer.